Are you ready to say goodbye to the constant ups and downs of the artist income roller coaster? Whether you're a full-time artist who wants to increase and stabilize your income, a part-time musician who wants to go full-time, or a hobbyist who needs to fund your passion projects, this podcast will equip you with the tools, resources, and inspiration to make it happen. My name is Bree Noble. I'm a musician, best-selling author, and educator whose mission is to help musicians like you to increase the income you're already making and tap into new income streams so you can create a more diverse, stable, reliable income from music and finally ditch the starving artist mentality. Now let's dive into the Profitable Musician Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Bree Noble, and I'm so happy to be here with Travis Marc. We actually recently met because we both have podcasts, and we kind of discovered each other's podcasts. And it's fun because we don't know each other too well yet, but we're kind of in the same space. So we're going to just give a little bit of our own experience and past. And then we're going to talk about what it is like working with musicians, how we help them, and kind of like some of the common themes that we've seen and, maybe some insights that we can kind of give each other that will then give to you as you listen. So he is a musician's mentor. And that's kind of his brand. He's also a working musician. I think he said he does like over 250 dates a year or something crazy like that. I cannot claim that, although I am a worship leader at a church. So I am busy every week with that. And I actually have a whole day event coming up tomorrow too. So it's like not just Sundays. But so we stay busy, but we also love doing this. We love helping musicians. So I'm going to just start out by asking Travis to kind of give me some background on your music journey and then how you ended up starting to help musicians as a consultant.
Okay, so I will keep this as short as possible so that we can get you to answer the same question. So at quite a young age, I discovered music, fell in love with it, as I'm sure most people do. But I wasn't sure if that was the path that I was going to go down because, I didn't have musicians in my family and nobody there to guide me. I grew up in Johannesburg, South Africa. And then when I hit my early teens, I really sort of dove into it. I will end up winning some money on radio, which is pretty cool, and bought a drum kit and basically put everything and anything I could into just trying to craft my musicianship, and it got to a point where I was playing in bands and some of those bands did very well. Some of them didn't do so well, but, just like anybody, the journey led to so many different things, like experiences with management, experiences with record labels, experiences just trying to keep a band together, being on the road, crafting music, writing, recording, pre-production, production, whatever it seemed to need, I was all in. And there was no way that I was not going to try and learn everything I could. And then as things seem to happen and as we get older, I realized that it's such an interesting path because there's so many people who claim to sort of give guidance and direction that if you do A, B, and C, you're going to get here. And if you do this, you're going to get, to all these places. And listen, it's all reasonable. But what I've learned is that there is no clear path. However, as a career musician, I've understood that there are certain things and certain assets, if you want to use that word, that if you have that taken care of, to get to that next goal is easier, or to have a plan to release your music in a certain way versus just putting it out there. It's easier. So, we were talking for a couple minutes about podcasting before this, and it's much the same game. If you go blindly, there is that chance of luck that maybe someone discovers your podcast, and that's cool. Like, listen, I'm not trying to say that that's not a cool experience to have. I'm very much in the mindset of try and have your ducks in a row. Try and be ready, try and be prepared. And I know it doesn't sound very rock and roll, but it served me well. And so how I now try and take my years of experience and use that sort of to try and help and maybe guide others is, listen, I've been down and around the block 1,000 times at this point. I've been in too many bands to even remember. I've traveled the world. I've been signed numerous times. I've been dropped numerous times. I've had songs charts. I've had songs that I thought should have charted and never did. I feel like I've got the experience to, when some people don't know what to do, I feel like I can help. And that's kind of why I started my podcast. Why did you start yours?
Okay. Well, okay. First of all, I just want to comment on a couple of those things. Like I call that stacking the deck in your favor, right? So you're learning from people that have done the thing already. Like you said, you've had songs that have charted, you have songs that didn't chart. Like it's even helpful just to hear from somebody who's not only had the successes but had the failures when you have the failure, that like you're not the only one, or like this doesn't mean your career is over and that kind of thing. And I think that's where mentorship is so great, is that we can, number one, like cut the learning curve, stack the deck in our favor, that kind of thing, but also know that like if something goes wrong, that doesn't mean that like we should hang it up and go home, because something has gone wrong for all the people that we look up to. We just don't necessarily see that in public. Sometimes we do, but if they're lucky, we're not seeing that in public, right? I always tell people when they're releasing a course or anything like an album, like nobody knows if nobody listens, right? Like no, like you can't tell if nobody bought your course, if nobody bought your lesson package or whatever it is. You're the only one that knows that.
Yeah,
Right? So then just move on. Well, that didn't work. That test didn't work. Let's try something else. And so I think that's really why we need mentors. I always, whenever I'm going to do something new, so like recently I released a Shopify shop for a
cool.
lot of my digital stuff, and I knew nothing about Shopify, right? So I went out and found someone that I knew had a really great Shopify shop that I really liked, and they knew how to use everything and they could really maximize the benefit. And I just went ahead and paid them to learn from them. And I think there's definitely a reason to do that, a reason to like shortcut it, right? Why not? Why would you just spend all this time trying to do something and then, have all these failures? It takes a lot longer and stuff when you can just pay for the shortcut. So I just wanted to kind
Exactly.
of comment on that.
Yeah. Yeah, listen, and it's totally true. And paying for stuff, if you're in a position that you can be extremely helpful. Where I feel, and again, I'm talking purely from my experience, I find that a lot of people also don't want to learn. And that kind of blows my mind sometimes. It's like, and it took me a long time to get to a point where I've always been very self-motivated. And whether that's a good or a bad thing, I guess you would have to ask the people around me. But I could never understand, especially when it comes to musicians, why so many musicians were so, up in the air and like just comfortable with certain situations that they found themselves in. And for years, I would always be like, man, you could be doing this, or you could try that, or hey, you sold out that venue tonight. Do you know if you did this, you could have made 30% more money? And if you maybe had two shirt designs, you could have sold 50% more shirts, or whatever the case may be. And things like that, it just always got my wheels spinning. But I also learned along the way that not everybody wants to learn. Not everybody wants to take the maximum sort of potential out of every opportunity. And that's totally okay. But for me, at least, since I started this particular podcast, I've just noticed that like the few people that have had consultations or have helped me just, maybe develop a timeline for certain things that they're trying to achieve, they've definitely achieved those way quicker than what they seem to have when they were just wandering around and throwing sort of mud at the wall, hoping it was going to stick.
Yeah. And I mean, it is true that some people don't want to learn. And I think they don't want to learn because then they have to do, because if they learn and then they don't do it, then they're going to feel bad. So it's better just for them just not to learn. That's true with some people. some people really want to learn, but what they really want is the shortcut. And when they find out that there is no such thing as like the super shortcut, right? Like the like it's only going to take me 10 minutes to do this thing, then they don't do. And then they're
Yeah,
like, oh, well, that was worthless or whatever. So yeah, there's the different people. And then there's the people like you and me where we're just predisposed to, like, we're curious. We want to know, how can we make this better? How can we do this better? Like you said, how could we raise the amount that we make on our merch table by 30%? Like, what are the
yeah,
levers that we can pull? That kind of thing. And those are the kind of people that you and I love working with, because
completely.
they're thinking like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so I'm going to get to my story just so you know.
yes.
So I lived a very different life from you. I was really 31 before I ever really got anywhere with my music career. I mean, I went to school, got a double degree in music and business, started working I ended up working as a director of finance at a top 15 opera company in the US, which was great experience. Interesting working around all these artsy people. I was still wanting to do something with my own music, and watching all these opera stars like getting paid, doing what they love, touring the country, all that stuff. And I was writing their paychecks, and that was somewhat depressing. So that kind of like pushed me into, like, I really need to really do something with my music and my talent and my songwriting and all that. I dabbled a lot while I was working there with a bunch of bands that were kind of a disaster, most of them. We've all been there.
Oh yeah.
And then I had a health crisis that kind of really pushed me out of working at the opera, because it was a great job, but it was very stressful because it's a nonprofit, and there were certain times of the year where we were flush with money, and other times that we had like less than zero money.
Wow.
And I was always the final defense against that, right? I was having to tell the vendors, can we pay you next week? And like making sure we had enough money in the account for payroll and things like that. And it was very stressful. It caused some issues with my health, and I ended up getting really sick, having an autoimmune disease, and having to leave the opera. But that ended up being kind of a catalyst for my music career, because we figured out how we could sell our house and make enough money to like make up for a while for what I was making. And because it was kind of that boom in Orange County, California back in the 2000s. And then I had a baby. So, I was trying to figure out how to juggle all these things. And
Yeah,
it gave me the space I needed to figure out how to stop trying to fit myself into all these bands that ended up as a disaster, and really put myself out there as a solo artist, using the network that I had built up with my church and people that I knew in my area. And so I built my music career around going to churches, women's events, moms events, business networking kind of events, and performing and also speaking. So that's kind of how I built my career during that time. I would drag my kids on tour with me, and so a very different way of being in a music career, but it worked
yeah,
for me. And then when my kids got to the age where they didn't want to be dragged on tour anymore, or they really needed to stay home and go to school, I had to kind of be like, I think I need to pull back on this for now. And what am I going to do now? And in the meantime, I'd met a lot of musicians. I had built up kind of this side thing called Women of Substance, which was an online radio station, became a podcast that's still going today, where we promoted music by female artists in all genres. And I'm like, why couldn't I build this?
yeah,
So I started building that even more, turned it into a podcast, selling ads, that kind of stuff. And then kind of the trajectory that happens to a lot of people when you build a platform like that, musicians kept coming to me going, how did you build your music career? Or I would see that, when I would go to look at the people that were applying to be on Women of Substance, I'd hear their song. I'm like, this is a really great song. Why can't I find you online? I could find zero things. And they'd say, like, oh, I'm waiting for a label to pick me up, and then they'll do all of my promotion for me. And I'm like, no.
Yeah. No,
So that,
indeed.
I started giving out some advice around that, and then started my female entrepreneur musician podcast to help people like that. And then it just kind of moved forward from there. I started my female musician academy, created a bunch of courses, transitioned that into the profitable musician brand where I had a bunch of summits and then during the pandemic, really helped musicians find alternate sources of income, helped them have a release plans for their music because they were all writing so much and wanted to release it. And then, now we're still going strong. It's been almost 10 years that I've been doing that side of my business.
Amazing.
And yeah, we have a whole brand around profitable musician. We have a weekday newsletter that helps musicians become more profitable, basically grow their fan base and diversify their income. And the podcast and still Women of Substance is still going. So I still support women in the industry as well.
Amazing. And the
And I'm a
podcast is
church leader.
spectacular.
So I ended up working at the church. I after COVID, I really needed to be in person again for a while, and I needed to get back into singing and stuff. And so I started working as a worship director at a church, and then I took on, because I had all this finance experience, I took on the business side at the church after I'd been there for almost a year. And so now I do that as well.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a second full-time job.
Many hats, Bree.
Yes, many hats.
Yeah. Which, that's a topic in on itself as well. Like, if you think about the average independent musician now, it's not like it was. And that sounds so old fashioned because like it was could really be as early as 15, 20 years ago. Musicians now need to have, or again, be in a position that they can pay for multiple hats. You've got to know how to work your finances, especially if you've got bills to pay and children and a house and all these things. You've got to know how to release your music. I find that is a interesting subject, the releases of music in general. Like there's so much stuff online. And again, everything is good to a point or completely, depending on the person's needs. But just seeing how many people don't even know how to release their music, it's quite mind blowing, you
Yeah, there
know?
is a lot of stuff online. I found that when I worked with musicians on this, it was about establishing a timeline for them
Yeah,
because they were just so overwhelmed with there is a lot of great information online, but when do I do this and when do I do this and and not kind of there's so many pieces to it because you're setting up your distribution. You first of all, you're doing the recording and all that. Some of them are doing it at home, some of them need a studio, they need to get side musicians. They basically need to know how to manage their project and so many different things. And then there's other things like, oh, well, if you want to tour after you release, you can't wait until you've released to start booking, or you'll have to wait another 6 months to get the gigs that you want. So you
yeah,
also have to think about the booking of the tour and do you want to do a release party? And, there's a lot and it's all really good stuff and important stuff to do, but knowing how to put it all together into like a timeline where you can keep up with it is what I
yeah,
find that's kind of what I focused on.
yeah. I have to agree.
Yeah. But like we were talking about the multiple streams of income, which I definitely want to get back to. I think, like you said, 15 to 20 years ago, maybe you could just focus on performing, or back then you could sell downloads on iTunes and or even you were selling a lot of CDs. I know when I was touring a lot, late 2000s, early 2010s, I was still selling a ton of CDs.
Yep.
Right, it's not as much a thing now. Well, you can still sell plenty of merch if you're really thinking about it and how to do it well. But if you think before the 2000s, I don't know. There was not many opportunities to actually have a career as an indie artist because it was like you didn't have the tools where you could even release on your own. It's if you don't get a record deal, then you're out of luck or you're just
Yeah,
having to do it like so DIY. And there were
yeah,
some people that did the whole out of the back of the car kind of thing, but they didn't even have the technology to be able to record very well from home back then.
yeah. Well, it's interesting because I was in a band, and again, we're talking over 20 years ago, that we got signed. We were signed with Sony BMG, and the band had a really good album. But anytime we wanted to sell those albums at gigs, we had to purchase them from
Ooh.
Sony at a discounted cost so that we could sell them at our gigs as merch. And the CD thing is interesting as well because, yeah, most people don't seem to buy CDs anymore. But what I do see, and I've heard some people talk about this, and it makes a valid point. I mean, I know that vinyl is very popular. I see you've got a Michael Jackson Thriller vinyl behind you. Super cool. Um, but vinyl is expensive to make as an independent artist. You can still make CDs pretty cheap, even though the average person doesn't seem to have a platform to play them. What I've noticed at gigs, and I'm just speaking from my own experience here, is do you know how many people will still buy CDs just to get you to sign them?
Mm-hmm.
Which, sounds kind of weird and like, why would you make CDs just to sign? But it's a lot easier to sign a CD for like a super fan than what it is to try and sign a shirt, So
Yep.
it's like, you can still get decent sort of CD prices made from platforms like CD Baby and some of these other kind of things. And you don't sort of spend the thousands that you do to get vinyl made. The only irony is most people don't have a CD player to actually play the platform anymore.
Yeah, you
It's
just need
like
to
it bums
stop.
me out because I really miss the days of like, especially in your car on these long journeys, you
Mm.
buy a CD from like the other band at the gig and you travel to the next town or whatever it was, and you could listen to the CD in the car. And now it's like, you can't do that. I mean, there's obviously the streaming platforms, which is great to a degree, I suppose, but it's funny how much it's
It's more of
changed.
a barrier to entry. You have to think, okay, before I like leave in the car, I need to like find them on Spotify and then like,
Yeah.
pick a playlist or something with that they have. Hopefully they've made a playlist. So yeah, it's not so easy and user friendly
Yeah.
to discover new music. Actually, there's a lot of ways to discover new music because of streaming, but if you want to listen to a particular person that you just discovered, it's a little harder, I think.
Yeah. And especially if they are new and kind of independent, sometimes, I've come across it over the last few months where it's like, I don't know if this is an AI problem or if maybe bands just aren't doing the research, but I'm noticing a lot of bands with the same names, a lot
Mm.
of artists with the same names. I mean, I was even in a situation when I was still living in England, there was even a situation where the band that I was in at the time before I left that country was sitting there the one day and up pops a notification on Spotify about our new release. And we're like, we don't have a new release. And like, listen, we were diligent. We had done our research, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We'd been out for a few years. And some band in Canada had decided to call themselves the same thing.
Oh,
And, it's like, listen, it doesn't matter. That's a real long-winded story, but it's interesting because you don't want to put music out under the same name as somebody. And obviously there are circumstances where that is your real name.
mm.
So you want to use your real name. But hey man, if someone beats you to it, and if there's a trademark involved, I don't know, you might want to just do your due diligence.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. But it's just such a crowded landscape. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't really seen if there's anybody else with my name on Spotify. I don't think so. But it's funny, my podcast outranks my music, which annoys me.
Well, I can understand that. I can understand that, because I've been in certain situations where it's like I'll look at the stats on an episode of my podcast, and for example, my band put out a new single like 3 weeks ago, and same thing. The podcast had all these numbers, and I was like, yeah, maybe I should just start putting my music into the podcast. But then it kind of blurs the lines, and I've never wanted it to be like look at me, look at me. It's like
Yeah.
that's not the purpose of the podcast. And I'm sure it's the same for you. The purpose is to have real conversations about real life situations in music and how certain things might save the next person some time or some money or some heartache, because there is a lot of heartache in this industry. It's like, even in your story there, it's like, I know that you had the financial job at the opera place and stuff like that, but there's heartbreak there because life pushes you in certain places that you are almost forced to make decisions. And music's no different. It's like you might love your band and love the music you put out, and maybe you have never made a cent from it. And depending on your financial situation, that could force you to give it up. And that in itself is heartbreaking.
Yeah, I work with a lot of people that are, it's like their second act. They raise their children, or especially because I run the Female Musician Academy. So a lot of women, they had a full-on corporate career and they were finally able to retire. And then they just wanted to focus on music full time because they've been wanting to all this time, or they discovered that something was missing. They gave up music when they were in their early 20s and went to work or whatever. And they're like, oh my gosh, now that I'm retired, I feel like something's missing. Or they even discovered during their career that they felt like something was missing. So, I think that there's so many life situations that can get in the way. And sometimes we can make the best of that and continue. And sometimes you do have to take a break, but then I've seen people come back with a vengeance,
Yeah.
like just prolific songwriting and recording in their 50s,
Yeah. Oh, listen, like people who count you out at a certain age, especially in music. When I was younger, I thought that was a real thing. Like I was told if you haven't made it by like the time you're like 26, it's never gonna happen.
Yep.
And I said it earlier, I was extremely self-motivated. So I would do whatever it took. I would stay up all night, I would practice all day, I would do whatever needed to happen to try and get to these places that I thought you needed to be. And the beauty of getting older is, at least again in my experience, is it's taught me that you can still be self-disciplined and have drive and all those kinds of things, but you start to realize that certain things that you thought were important maybe aren't so important. And for me, it allowed me, at least with my own journeys, to really look ahead and think about what I wanted, visualize what I wanted. Nowadays everyone uses the word manifest so much, right? Like, I wouldn't say that that's what I was trying to do or did or anything like that, but I think it's so important for anybody, but because we're trying to relate this to music, I think it's so important to just have a clear vision of what you're trying to achieve. Because how can you try and work to something or towards something if you don't know what it is you want? And in saying, oh, I want people to listen to my music, that's very broad, very broad. I mean, we all want people to listen to our music. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't be playing music. And, it's like, I don't know for yourself as a writer. For me, I've always looked at writing as a therapeutic kind of thing. And I genuinely feel like I write for myself, as selfish as that sounds. I feel like I write for myself because when I listen back sometimes, I'm like, man, I'm really quite a happy person. Like, doesn't sound like I'm happy. But then I kind of think about it and I go like, I obviously use that source as, an escape. And so to bring it back around to what I'm trying to say here is, as much as I feel like I write for myself, when I put music out, it still makes me very happy knowing that people are listening to it. It still makes me very happy knowing some people still buy it, and so on and so on and so on. So it's like, I just think, and I'm sure your experiences are similar. I just find that to say I want people to hear my music is too broad. You've got to like really hone it in. You've got to have a goal and figure out the steps to your goal. Some people are so clear about it. They know that they need to do A, B, and C to try and get to whatever that goal is. Other people have to work backwards. It's like I always found that was my approach because I couldn't quite see the clear path to what I was trying to achieve. But working backwards is a great way to do it. You kind of think, I want a podcast, or I want to do this. I want to play at such and such a festival, whatever. How do you get there? Sometimes looking at the end results and sort of rewinding is a bit easier than kind of going, well, I'm going to put out my music and I hope people listen to it. And maybe those guys at that festival will book me. Well, yeah, maybe you'll also win the lottery by playing. It's like there is a chance, but I don't know. It's like you said earlier, put the sort of put everything in your favor. And there's a chance that it might still not work. You've got to be okay with that. It's a brutal career, but you've got to kind of at least know that you did what you could. I remember reading an interview with this drummer, Eric Singer, who he was probably most famously known for being in Kiss, and he played with Alice Cooper for a while. He was a real big session guy for a period of time until he basically put everything into Kiss when they replaced Peter Criss back in the day. But I remember reading an interview of his, and I couldn't have been older than maybe 16 or 17. And I can't remember the question that was necessarily asked towards him, but he answered saying, the last thing you want to do is get that call and not be prepared. Now, obviously, that applies more to a playing perspective, but it can apply to a career perspective. You don't want to finally be in that position that you get that break that you've been dreaming of or wanting or wishing for and be like, oh, I don't know what to do now, and fall on your face. Because, like, I think that would mentally really affect you, I would think, you know?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, that's why I think we need to, I mean, in this landscape, we are expected to build our career to a certain extent before we're even going to be considered by
Yeah.
anyone, like festivals, like indie labels, like any, regular label, like any of them, right?
Yeah.
We have to show that we've taken initiative, and so that's kind of goes to what you just said of being ready, showing that you have taken the initiative.
Yeah.
But I'm curious what you were when you were saying before, like, oh, people told you, if you didn't make it or whatever, and before you were 26, then you were done. But like at that time, what did you consider making it? Because obviously you've done so much. You've been in all these different bands, you've toured, you've been on a label. Like, did any of those things say to you, oh, I've made it? Or was it always like the next thing then?
Not once did any of those things tell me that. And I wasn't even sure what making it meant, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So, young, innocent, and naive, my first goal was like, okay, I play multiple instruments now. And I did start dabbling young, but my first real goal, I grew up in South Africa. And then eventually I moved to London, and I stayed in London for almost 20 years. So like I look at both of those countries as home. Now I live in America. So this is slowly becoming home. But my first goal when I was in South Africa was like, man, if I could get to like 24, 25 and be regarded as like an in-demand drummer and like get calls for good gigs and stuff, that'll be the dream. Like you always like, that's the dream. And listen, I worked my butt off, man. I did every gig I could do. I played for everybody I could. I would play on anybody's recordings who would have me. I would do any tour that would have me. I would do anything. And, by the time I got to 24, thankfully I'd been in a few bands that had already toured internationally. And the one band had done this really interesting concept called the Global Battle of the Bands.
Mm.
And nowadays, I look at battles of the bands as very interesting concepts. I don't have the same love for them now that I know really how they work as what I did as a kid. But as a kid, this seemed like such a big deal. And the band that I was in, we got flown to London. It was like maybe my second or third time there. And we played at this venue called the Astoria. It's no longer there, but it was beautiful. You can find old videos of like the Who playing at the Astoria and like really cool, like just massive bands of like the 60s and 70s. And anyway, we were representing South Africa as the global battle of the bands winner for our country. And we went up against 31 other countries. There were 32 countries involved, each with a band from their country representing. And I didn't know that particular day that they were going to announce other things on the evening of the final besides who the winning band was. And the band I was in didn't win. They announced the winner, they announced second place. And then they started to go, oh, and best guitarist, such and such guy from such and such a band from whatever country, and best singer, this. And then they announced best drummer, and I won best drummer. And I was like, what? And not a big deal, because who cares? I was trying to hope that my band won. I didn't even know that this was a thing. But I ended up going back to South Africa. And everyone was a bit deflated because we didn't win. You're young and you think that those things actually matter, but they don't really matter. But I went back, and that particular little attribute, award, flex that all the kids say now, whatever you want to call it, that really helped me. And suddenly I started getting better gigs, bigger gigs. And then I ended up getting a Zildjian endorsement, which Zildjian is a cymbal brand, which is like one of the biggest cymbal drum manufacturers in the world, right? They don't make drums, but they make cymbals. They're just known in the drum world. And at the time, I was one of like 5 guys in the entire country to have a Zildjian endorsement. And then it dawned on me that I was like, whoa, like my first goal that I remember once I'd started playing drums was like, if I could get there, that's the dream. That means I've made it. And then I got there because suddenly I was looked at as like this hot up and coming drummer in the country, and I was getting all these opportunities. But I quickly realized that wasn't making it, And so, then you kind of set the next goal and all these things. And long story short, because I know I'm blabbering on a bit here, but the thing that made me realize that everyone's definition is probably different was, so fast forward many years, and I'm eventually living in London, and I'm playing in bands, and, I happen to do quite well. I get involved with this band. We get a couple singles on the Billboard charts. We tour in the country up and down most weeks or weekends, and it's going quite well. Of course, things also fell apart. And so then I start working as a musician. I've already been working as a musician for all these years, but I decide like, maybe I'll give that sort of aspect of it a break for a while. And I'll just go play with friends, and I'll go play some bars and pubs and coffee shops and whatever, same sort of mentality. Whatever I can do to try and figure out what I want to do is the next thing. And I remember this really prominent named Craig Blundell. He famously plays for a guy named Steve Wilson now. And at the time he was in a band called Frost, very progressive kind of music. And he didn't live too far from me. And he put up this thing online. He was going to take a handful of students for private lessons if they wanted, And it wasn't cheap, but something I've always tried to do, even now, is every few months I try and book some lessons with somebody more experienced or possibly more experienced, just to try and get a different mindset, sort of like we were talking about earlier. You pay for something to try and get some more information. And I went there and I sat down, as most lessons work. He said, well, play me something. And I played him a bunch of stuff, and he said, well, what do you want to do here? I was like, I don't really know. Like, I wanted to book a lesson and have a chat, see what happened, And we got talking, and I keep this little diary. I know that most people keep their schedules on their phones now, but I seem to be a little accident prone, and I break too many phones. And so I keep an actual written diary. It's no bigger than my phone, and I write all my gigs in it. And I keep 2. I keep one with me at all times because I seem to always get calls about gigs, thankfully. And then I keep a big one at home that I write all my scheduling, podcast interviews, gigs, all those kinds of things in. And he goes, what's that? And I'm like, oh, that's my gig diary. And he goes, do you mind if I have a look? I said, oh, no, by all means, And he took it, and again, it's small, he's paging through it, he's sitting next to me, and he goes, wow, you're quite busy, huh? I said, yeah, man, I'm busy, And he goes, is this all you do? I said, yeah. And he goes, man, you've made it, huh? And I kind of smirked, and I said, no, dude, you've made it. Like, you're playing with, these huge bands, and you've got like and all this stuff, and you're doing all these things. And he said to me, he said, no, dude, you paying your bills? I said, yeah. He said, you've made it. And man, the penny dropped. I was just like, yeah. I mean, obviously, we would all love to have careers of like the Michael Jacksons and the Elvis Presleys and the Beatles and all these huge stars. But again, in hindsight, especially as I get older, I kind of go, I wonder if they were really happy,
Mhm.
being mobbed all over the place. And sure, the paycheck must have been nice, but I'm not broke and I don't have debts and I have a pretty good life. Like, I get to play music with my friends, I get to travel, I get to play nice gear, I get to talk to people like you about music. Like, does it get better? You know what I mean? Like, so I think, to really be long-winded here, I think that's what making it is now. And obviously there's, caveats to it depending on what your main goal is. But if you can pay your bills and, you know, I don't know, feel good about yourself when you're getting into bed at nights, I think you can kind of count your blessings.
Exactly. I mean, I think for me, I went through the whole phase of like, I wanted to be famous or in a famous band or whatever, and I got over that. And then I wanted to tour and I wanted to be on stage and all that. And then once I had kids and life got crazy, I got over that. And then I wanted to build this big online platform and I did that. And then during COVID, like it was a lot because I was online all the time and it was
Yeah,
great. I helped so many people and built a great business, but then I wasn't happy with that. You know what I mean? Because I felt like I needed to connect with people in person again. And so I think making it is not feeling like there's something missing.
yeah,
And so for me, I think right now is I'm not feeling like something's missing because I am scratching that itch to be able to perform once a week or lead people in music and bring joy to people with music and keep up my vocal chops and my piano playing and all that. It's built into my schedule.
amazing.
So I'm not feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm neglecting this or something's missing. And then, I'm still able to do the business stuff. If I had to give that up, then I would feel like that was missing. So
Yeah.
it's figuring out, what balance you need in your life to feel like nothing major is missing is kind of maybe what I've come to with what making it means.
Well, you just said the word balance, and I think it is everything. And listen, from a performance side, my wife will be the first to tell you I sometimes personally struggle finding balance because, again, thankfully, and this is not me trying to sound egotistical in any way, thankfully, I'm in a position where I'm really busy. I'm really busy. And I guess thanks to my parents, both in a good and a bad way, I'm a workaholic. I love working. I don't like taking time off. I even struggle to just sit down and watch a movie. I'm not into it. There's something in me that doesn't like to switch off. But I've learned to use that to my advantage. However, balance is everything, and like, to again to hone it all in and make this maybe for musicians, it's like I would say, and I'm going to ask you the same question here. I would say, like, from my side, when I'm talking to people, like I'm busy helping this particular guy. I'm not going to mention his name, but I'm busy helping this one guy strategize a lot of his career. Like we're talking about timelines for first release, second, third album, videos, branding, etc., etc., etc. And it's interesting because sometimes people like ask me, "Oh, what do you need? What do you have to do? How do you make money? What do you have to do to?" And we just use the phrase "make it." Like, what do you have to do to make it? Listen, I can't answer that for every individual, but I think really, if you can identify three things, I think you probably have a clearer path to making it on whatever terms those are that you want. And I would say, one, identify your goals. Two, really refine your branding. And then three, and I'm putting this one purely because we were just talking about it. And again, I cannot state enough that this has always been my weakness on a personal level, but find balance. If you can find ways to work towards those goals and then find balance to be happy, you're made, man. You're made.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's why, yeah, my platform is the profitable musician, but I try to explain to people that it's not just about money because, you can be profitable with your time.
Yeah.
If it's using the thing that you have wisely and getting more out of it than you put in. And that's why I teach productivity. That's why I teach, how to build a team to help you out. That's why I teach time management and, from a musician perspective, because a lot of times we're cobbling things together. We have a part-time job, or if you're like me, you have like basically two full-time jobs plus a family.
Yeah.
You got to figure out how to make that work and not get burnt out, not hate your life. And then, like I said, also making sure that you don't have any major pieces missing, because I remember that feeling when I worked at the opera, and that feeling, it was like a like gut, like in my gut, like just this discomfort of like, I am not fulfilling my purpose because I am not out there performing in some way. I'm not doing music. I'm not using the talent that God gave me.
Yeah.
And that bothered me 24/7. So if you've got something like that, you got to figure out how to work that out, how to figure out how you're going to fill that hole,
Yeah. Trust
right?
your instincts.
Yep.
So what are three attributes or characteristics that you think musicians should try and learn if they don't have them naturally?
I definitely the productivity side. I kind of call it learning how to be your own boss, because when we work at companies, someone's telling us what to do, when it needs to be done, the hours in which we need to work, those kind of things. And when you're a musician, even if you're doing it on the side, like I say, look, these are your musician hours, put those on your calendar, but then you have to figure out how to organize those hours, what you're going to do within them, and no one's going to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
So it's basically being your own boss, or, I used to say like the CEO of your musician business, but a lot of musicians don't identify with that. So I would say learning to be your own boss, and knowing and learning how to check in with yourself and be honest with yourself. Are you really doing what you told yourself to do
Yeah.
that week?
Yeah.
And are there better ways you can do it? That kind of thing. So that's one big thing, figuring out what income streams fit well for you. Because I think I have this free guide called the 39 little known income streams for musicians. And that's really to get your mind thinking. And my fear is that some people get that and they try to do all of them. And you can't do that. First of all, you have to pick a few and go all in on those, but also knowing which ones work best for you, because some of them will not fit with your personality. Some of them will not fit with the lifestyle that you have. And so just figuring out, like for me, I learned over time, I don't like doing one-on-one coaching because I don't like someone else being in control of my calendar.
Mm.
So you got to learn those things for yourself. And sometimes you have to try them and go, nope, this is not for me. Or, when I think about having to do this thing, I get like this feeling in the pit of my stomach, the stress feeling. That means no matter how it's figuring out between that and like doing something uncomfortable, right? I need to do this uncomfortable thing and I'm feeling this stress feeling, but I need to learn how to overcome that, because this uncomfortable thing is going to get me to the next level where I want to be, versus I'm taking on this thing as part of my business model, but I really don't like it. And I've got to be honest with myself. I'm never going to like it. And I'm just going to resist it every time. So that's, I guess, the second thing, is just figuring out what income pursuits make the most sense for you. And then the third thing is figuring out a way to bring more people into your ecosystem without hating it. Everything I say is about without hating it, because if you hate it, you won't do it.
Yeah.
But you do need to bring more people into your ecosystem. You need to find the people that are the right fit fans for you and your music and whatever it is you're doing. And if that's not social media, that's okay. Because I used to have a lot of people that would be like, I know you're going to tell me I have to do social media. I'm like, you don't have to. But if you don't, you got to do something else.
Yeah.
You better be out there performing 3 times a week and getting a bunch of email addresses when you're in front of the people. I don't care how you get your connection with them, but you need to find a way to connect with new people and build a bridge
Yep.
so they stay connected with you. So figuring out, how to know who the right people are for you. And a lot of times they are people that are like you. So like you said about branding, thinking about what's important to you, what are you like, what do you like to do, and then kind of thinking about the people that would make sense, that would be drawn to you automatically because you have things in common. And then how can you get in front of those people?
Yeah.
It could be social media, it could be performing live, it could be who knows what. Sometimes I had some people that I've worked with that they're streamers. They do Twitch and stuff like that. And
Twitch.
that's how they meet their people. Or
Yeah.
they have other things that they do besides music, and that's how they can, they write comic books or, just different things, right? That they do that, or they make independent movies or whatever it is, things that connect them with people that are going to also like their music. So
Yeah.
I guess those are the 3 things. Very long-winded.
No, not at all. And it's funny because there's so many similarities. Obviously, we met today, or we've seen each other in person today, and we're wording certain things in different ways, but there's similarities because, like the thing that you mentioned there with the time for your music career, the CEO for the music career, it's like it's no different to what I tell the people that I work with. It's like it's self-discipline, and it's like everyone seems to have this idea, especially like there's so many different personalities, which is brilliant. But some people seem to think that if they're not doing something in every minute of every hour, every day, are they not really pushing for their career, this and that, this and that. That's not true. If you can only dedicate an hour, dedicate that hour, but just know what you're going to be doing in that hour. I find that these things have become the devil because, hey, I've got 2 hours to do some work this morning. I don't have any consultations. I don't have to practice. I don't have to get to a gig till tonight. Cool. And I'll sit down in my studio. Oh, let me just check this real quick. Oh, a reel. Awesome. Hey, next reel. Awesome. Oh, look, a funny dog. Cool. I love dogs. Next one. And then next thing you go, damn, I've been on this thing for 40 minutes. I only put an hour aside for the music stuff today. And then panic sets in. And once you're panicked and stressed, well, now your brain's all cluttered. And now to get the initial goal done is almost impossible. It was impossible because you've already gotten rid of most of your time, but you've got to have clear definition, and as boring as it is, as much of the creative mind as we don't want to be dictated and structured, if you know that you're going to be putting a certain amount of hours aside each day for your music development or your career, whether that's a playing point of view or a career point of view, man, a useful tip that I've sort of found helps. And again, it sounds so boring and structured, but just like a business or a CEO person or a finance person will sometimes do, and they will have their agenda for the next day, the night before. If you do the same thing, but maybe don't think in terms of days and nights, think in terms of weeks or months, this becomes so much easier. If you go to bed tonight going, well, tomorrow I probably need to create some content for whatever, and I should probably book that gig with that club that keeps emailing me, or I should probably finally get the mastering done on that new single, or whatever, insert the scenario for yourself. But you keep putting it off, like the thing that maybe you hate doing. If you write that down and figure out I'm a big step guy, you know. I got to do steps A, B, and C to get there. Okay, well, tomorrow I'll do A. Because, like you said, if you're focusing on like 100 things, or you've got a list of 39 things, the average person, especially the hungry, wanting a career type person, thinks that all 39 have to be done. But listen, if you've got teams and you can dictate certain jobs to certain team members, of course you can get all 39 done. But if you're doing it by yourself independently, that's so overwhelming because you're already thinking about the mastering, the single release, the music video. Oh, I got to practice, got to make that set list for tomorrow. Oh, I got to finalize that merchandise. Oh man, I was supposed to do that cameo for so and so. I still got to get distribution here. I got to sign the BMI documentation there. I've got to, all these things. So you've already got a dozen things to do. And then you look at now adding all these things, it becomes overwhelming. And the moment you get stressed, badly stressed, I'm not talking good stress. Some people can stress well and work through that. But in my experience, the moment you get overwhelmed, stressed, bad, negative stress, it's easier to just go, I'll do it tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And then next thing tomorrow never comes. And then 6 months have gone by and you're like, I didn't put out that song. Or you did, but it got totally lost in the shuffle, which is so easy now because you got like a ridiculous figure of songs being released daily. The last time I read it, it was 75 to 100,000 songs a day. And then I just happened to dabble on a news article yesterday. Apparently that's now gone up to 120,000 a day. Now, listen, I don't know if that's true. I imagine it would be. But how do you stand out when there's 120,000 being released a day? How does your song stand out? And it might never happen. This is kind of what I was sort of saying earlier. You've kind of got to accept some kind of comfortableness somehow. Not be okay with failures all the time. Try and have goals to achieve. But also accept that maybe with you not having $1 million budget for marketing in comparison to a Beyonce type figure, well, obviously her song is going to get pushed and on all the algorithms naturally versus yours. But that doesn't mean yours failed. It's just, I think a bigger failure would be, I'm just not going to put it out because it's too much work. Just do the work. And if you never put out music again, hey, man, trust me, as someone who's got numerous releases with different bands out there, you will be way happier when you're feeling nostalgic and you go back and go, I'm so glad we did that. Versus, hey, I've got this really cool record on my hard drive, but no one will ever hear it. Like, let people hear it, man. Someone will like it, surely. And even if it is just one person, like, that's success. You shared your art with that one person and it meant something to them. That's a great gift, That's why I look at it.
I agree. I think the same way about my first album. It's like some of it, I love the production. Some of it, I skimped on the production because I just couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
But I still go back and go, I'm really glad I put this song out. Like,
yeah.
I may have never done it otherwise. And I'm glad it's in the world. It's a good song. It might not be like top production, but that's okay.
It's totally okay.
I did it,
And also, like, listen, this sounds a bit stupid, but when it comes to songwriting and things like that, I've always kind of looked at it as like, how many ideas can you have before the ideas are full? Kind of like a USB stick. Remember those little memory sticks that were so popular?
Yep.
You don't really see them anymore, but because we now have the clouds. but I always used to like think, I can only fit so many things on this. And songwriting's kind of the same. So if you didn't put out that song, there's a chance you wouldn't finish the next one. Or maybe you land up with all these pieces of songs, but you never have a complete song. My brother always used to say that to me. I always have thousands of ideas and still do. And he'd always go, you need to finish one at a time. And like, it used to bug me. Whatever, man, you go finish a song. But he's right. Like, put it out. It clears up some space. It's no different to when you like have 100 things to do in your daily life and you got to pay the electricity bill and, I don't know, walk the dogs, feed the kids, grocery shop, clean the house, cook, like you don't have space for all of that in your head, especially if you're creative. You still need to be creative. So like, if that's what's going to make you happy, just do whatever you need to do to create space, find the balance, be happy at the end of the night, go to bed, wake up and do it all again tomorrow.
I love it. I love it. That is a great like cap on this, I think. We've had such a great conversation and we're clearly very similar minded.
I agree.
So everyone that's listening to this or watching this is going to want to check out your podcast. So where do they find it?
You can find it anywhere. You can either just go to our website, musicians-mentor.com, or just go on any of the typical streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, Amazon, all those kinds of things. Just type in Musicians Mentor. It'll come up. And what I'm going to do for yours, Bree, is I'll just link the Profitable Musician podcast in my show notes. And then I'm going to take this audio and I'm going to do a pre and post. And in that, which I'll send to you beforehand, of course, for approval, I will hype you up, all of the beautiful work you do, and we'll just take it from there.
Oh, you're so much more organized than me. I just
I
one
doubt
and
that.
done, you know,
I
because
doubt that.
gotta fit it into my life. So, no editing.
Amazing.
But
No, that's really
are
good.
you also on social? I know you're on Instagram because that's where I connected with you.
Yeah, I'm on socials, mostly as Travis Marc. But you got me through the Musician's Mentor one, which I think on Instagram is Musician Mentor Pics. And
Yes.
I don't post on it very often. I post really about the podcast, whoever the guest is or whatever we've done. We've been doing these songwriter rounds lately, so I would do post about that as well.
Well,
But we're
I
on
guess I'm
Facebook.
lucky you responded then, since you don't post on there that often.
Thank you so much for reaching out. It's been a great opportunity, and I think you guys are doing a great job. So the fact that we could kind of partner up on this is a lot of fun. I've been wanting to do this kind of thing, and it's so funny because it's like I feel like it gets a little blurry because obviously we're talking so across the board here, which kind of contradicts for me personally some of the things that I've spoken about here. But I just think it's, to talk about some of the great things that a podcast like yours does, or even just some of the things that I think mine does, like it would take us longer than an hour. So I encourage everybody to go check out your podcast, check out my podcast, check out like-minded podcasts. Just like do whatever you can to learn, because the information
I think
is
different
there.
perspectives helps. Your perspective
Completely.
is so different from mine. You've lived in multiple countries, you've toured, you've been in all these bands. I've lived in California, had kids and balanced a career and a family. It's very different, but you can learn from both. And then there's so much that we have in common as well.
Totally. And just to kind of conclude here, the fact that the lives are so different, yet still end up on very similar paths is a beautiful thing. Because like for listeners, then you can understand that, like you had said earlier, there is no wrong. There's no path. If you decide at 75, you want to put out a single and you've got the drive to do it, you can do it, man. Like no different to these 4-year-old multi-crazy instrumentalists that you see on Instagram that have like 500,000 followers. Listen, okay, obviously parents are handling those accounts, but the proof's there. If you want to do it bad enough, you'll do it. You just have to sometimes, unfortunately, refine what you're trying to do. And then, like you had said earlier, dedicate a certain amount of time to it, because wanting things, talking about things, and actually doing things are all very, very different things.
Yep, you're speaking my language. I'm all about action. So that's what we teach here. So Thank you so much. This has been so great. Thank you so much for all of your experience and knowledge and sharing it with everybody that's listening and watching.
Thank you as well, Bree. I look forward to the final thing coming out, and this is going to be great. When I put it out, I'll talk to you about it after this, but I'm going to basically just work it. It's sort of similar to one of the Spotify or Instagram collaboration deals, where it'll come out and it'll probably somehow make it look like we've featured artists on the same song,
Cool. I love that idea. I can't wait to see it. Thanks for listening to the Profitable Musician Show. I would love to know your takeaways and aha moments from this episode. Leave me a comment over at profitablemusician.com so I can bring you more of the information, interviews, and resources that you love. Thanks to Rondi Faye, one of my Academy members, for providing the music for our podcast. You can check her out at rondifay.com. That's RANDIFAY.com. Just remember, knowledge is power, but without implementation, it is useless. And inspiration without action is merely entertainment. But I know you're not just a dreamer, you are a doer. And I promise I'll be here every week to support you and remind you that you can be a profitable musician.